First, I'd like to start off by introducing myself. My name is Bob De Silva. I'm the mayor of East Providence, and I want to thank all of you who are here today, who took the time out of your busy lives to come in and give some input to what we plan on doing here in Watchemoket Square. It's very important to us as a community to make sure that we get everyone's buy-in and input, ideas. So this is what this is about here today. I want to recognize that our Vice President of the Council and Councilman at Large, Bob Rodericks, is in attendance. If we can get a nice round of applause for Councilman Rodericks. Also, I believe all of our Planning and Economic Development Department members are here today, including Jim Moran, who's our principal planner. Of course, the leader of the team, Bill Fazioli, who will be coming up here in a few minutes. Also, I want to thank our engineering firm that we've partnered with, Beta Group. They're doing an incredible job. They've already put a lot of work. A nice round of applause for them, please. And we also have the executive director of the Waterfront Commission, Pam Sherrill, who does a lot of work here in East Providence. Nice round of applause for her. So I'm just going to start this off. I'm not going to keep you too long. I'll be turning it over to Bill in a minute, but I am so excited about all of the great things that are going on here in East Providence. And it's been going on for quite some time. I can't take the credit for what's going on here. I can certainly hope to continue the positive progress, which is what we're doing under our administration. But the things that are going on in this city with the Bull Point concert series right up the street has really transformed what people think of East Providence's waterfront. You know, Black Duck, Comedy Connection, all of those, the 133 Club, all of these existing establishments, I believe, are all benefiting for the success that is going on our waterfront, and will continue, and the ideas and the plans and the things that are going to be coming in the future. But Watchemoket Square, to us, is where it all started. And if you don't have a great entryway into the waterfront, if you don't have something that's inviting, people don't know where they are. And this is part of what this whole grant is about. But I don't want to go on and on. I want to leave something for Bill to say, so I'm going to call up our Planning and Economic Development Director, Bill Fazioli.
Thank you, Mayor. So again, thank you everyone for coming out tonight. It's really important that we get your feedback and your input and take time to make your comments known on the poster boards. This is really meant to you get a sense of what you want out of this area. And the mayor mentioned the waterfront district. Just a quick history. It was established in 2003. And the idea was to take some of these older, underutilized, former industrial properties and bring some new life back to them. And over the 15 or 16 years that we've been operating, I think you've seen that starting all the way up in Phillipsdale down to Kettle Point. You've seen properties that were contaminated, heavily polluted, that were closed off to the public, and now sites for redevelopment. There are opportunities for housing and employment and public access to the waterfront. Much of this area was sort of fenced off because people were prohibited from coming in and enjoying the river and the bay. But now we're seeing a big return to the waterfront. The concert series that started 3 years ago was a huge turning point in bringing a catalyst to future development and attention to Watchemoket Square. So we're very grateful that things are moving along very nicely in the waterfront district, but also in the city outside, also outside the waterfront district. There are a number of projects that are becoming to our city because of the development in the waterfront district. You know, people now who travel here, who may have not been as familiar with East Providence, are looking to promote housing and employment opportunities all throughout the city. So the catalyst really started here, but it's in the next couple of months you'll hear about projects that are happening in the city that are taking place in Riverside, in Rumford, Central East Providence, all in some part due to what's happening here in the waterfront. So it really did serve that catalyst. The waterfront district is a small area. It's only 300 acres. But we were able to highlight and feature the best points of East Providence and sort of get people interested. And we're going to see some significant projects coming in, and we're excited about that. And those details will be ready, fairly soon. But tonight's about Watchemoket Square, as the mayor said, is to talk about where the city's central business district was for years before the highway reconstruction. We're looking to reclaim that. And when you look at the history of communities, cities established, hundreds of years ago as places to where people, sought shelter, resources, water, and a place to gather. And that was Watchemoket Square, and we'll have, Mr. Weeks talk about sort of the historical context of Watchemoket Square. And then over time, cities became centers of commerce and exchange and trade. And East Providence, this was the place not too far from here where the banks were and the shops and the markets. That got interrupted, unfortunately, when the highway system came through. So we're seeing cities evolve now, where cities now are becoming not necessarily, major centers of commerce and trade, but, areas where people can come and exchange ideas, have lively experiences, culture experiences, come for a night out to eat, listen to some music, listen to some comedy, and gather with each other to have those, opportunities. And we think Watchemoket Square organically is returning to that, to those roots because of the development in the area. So we need to sort of bring that to the next level where we need some improvements here to make it more accessible, make it more pedestrian safe, draw on the city's existing arts and entertainment and cultural qualities and bring it here and highlight it here. So we're very excited about the potential of Watchemoket Square. I've lived in the city 30 years, and a lot of times you would drive up and down Warren Avenue, and it was not a lot going on in the area, but on Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights, you see a very lively district that sort of is evolving, and it's only going to get better. And we're very excited about that. This opportunity to use the expertise from Data Group and the funding that's in place from EDA and the Commerce RI to really take this place to another level. So we're very excited about it. You'll learn a little bit more about the possibilities and the thought process that we're hoping to bring it to at the next level. But before we get into that aspect, we thought it would be good to have Mr. Weeks talk about sort of the historical context of Watchemoket and where it speaks to this region even before there was an East Providence. As a lot of people realize East Providence didn't exist until relatively recently in time. That we were actually part of Massachusetts and Rehoboth at an earlier time. So we thought it would be a good opportunity for some of you who aren't familiar to hear some of that history. So let's turn it over.
What's the name of this YouTube channel? If somebody wants to look it up.
Well, the easiest thing to do is to go on the web and look for Soames Heritage Area. It's on your brochures.
Okay, excellent. It's definitely worth watching if you have time, and you learn so much about the history. That's why I'm so glad that he's involved with this process, because I certainly believe, and I know the people in our administration believe, that we want to focus on what was here before, what's come since, and where we're going in the future. And I think that's something that we as a community want to pay homage to. So with that said, I'm going to introduce Jim Moran, who's one of our principal planners, and he's got a few words to say.
Thank you, Mayor. That was great, David. We really appreciate that. I know David did an extensive presentation on the Watchemoket Square Day that was very informative, and I appreciate your insight and your knowledge on this topic. One of the things I wanted to really just kind of jump back into quickly is as you proceed here, I know some people may have walked in since we started our presentation. If you have, welcome. We're working here with Beta Group to develop answers and opinions on a variety of topics. You can see Beta's worked very hard to put boards here with a number of questions here that it's very important that we get as much feedback as possible. Please don't hesitate to provide any comments that you might have as you walk around the room. We've got a presentation scheduled for 5:30, and we'll certainly have some good information that's going to be presented in a slideshow, a PowerPoint slideshow that I think will give you a very great deal of information about what we're potentially planning for the square. Certainly you can see some of the images on the boards here that kind of indicate what's being proposed a little bit at this point in time, but your input's very important. Secondarily, and kind of importantly, there are some snacks in the back of the room. I noticed that people haven't really been approaching them, but there are some snacks back there. If people feel they need to get a little bit of a refreshment, please feel free to step up and enjoy the refreshments. And then in the meantime, again, we have about 25, how long is it? About 10 after 5 right now? So in about 20 minutes, we're going to be beginning our formal presentation. I think you'll find it very informative. And then at the conclusion of that presentation, there'll be some additional time if people have questions that they want to ask of the team that's here. we'll certainly do some introductions. We're going to be hearing from additional individuals from the Native American community. I guess, and Elmer is going to be presenting later on too as part of that presentation. So we're looking forward to that. And again, if there are any questions, there's a number of team members here who are here to answer any questions you might have. And again, very pleased to see you here. I don't know if anybody had any questions right now. Is there anything that came up? People have any questions right now that I could hopefully answer? No? Okay, so looking forward to getting started with the presentation. And again, please enjoy the refreshments as you enjoy this public meeting. And I think it's great to see as many people as we have here. Thank you.
Greetings, everyone. For everyone, we'll just find a nice, comfortable place to sit. For those of you who have just arrived and were not here earlier, my name is Bob De Silva. I'm the mayor of East Providence. I also want to recognize in the crowd, for those who were not here earlier, it is our councilman at large, Bob Rodrigues. Councilman, if you just put your hand up. And also the senator who represents this area of East Providence, Senator Val Lawson. She was at the State House. She was managed to get away just to be here at the meeting, so nice round of applause for her. And now I'd like to introduce somebody who's very, very involved. He's a city employee. He's our affirmative action officer, but he does so much more than that. He really is somebody who is involved in putting together all of the community type events that we have at City Hall. He's really a good conduit to people in the community. So we count ourselves lucky to have him part of the team. Alma Pina.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Like the mayor said, my name is Elmer Pina. I'm the Affirmative Action EEO officer for the city of East Providence. I've been with the city about 15 years now, so it's a pleasure to be here tonight and part of this process. I'd like to thank Jim Moran and the planning department and Eric and the rest of his team. Earlier, Dr. Weed had asked if there were any Native Americans in the room, and I looked around, and they are, and I'd like to introduce them to you. And one of the questions he had asked is, how do you know if there are any Native Americans living next to you or friends of you? And I think that's important, is to ask. So in the room, I'd like to introduce two people who've been very special to me. I've been learning a lot about Native American history with these two individuals, and every day it's a learning process. But I consider them my friends now, and I'd just like to introduce them. So first I'd like to introduce you the elder Carol Little Meadow Brown. Thank you, Carol. And to her left is Patricia Gentle Rain Baptista Booker, who is the medicine woman. And also to Chief Harry the Hawk Edmonds is in attendance. And lastly, wow, we are honored to have the Sagamore of the Pokanoket Nation, William Winds of Thunder Guy. Sagamore, I ask if you could say a few words on behalf of the nation, please. Thank you.
They say be ready in season and out of season, right? Well, I'd like to welcome you to the land of the Pokanoket. Actually, going back in the 1600s, this was actually part of Seekonk, Massachusetts, Bristol County, Mass. So I'd like to welcome you on behalf of our tribe, the Pokanoket tribe, and I am the Sagamore of the Pokanoket tribe and Pokanoket Nation. And Harry is one of the sub-chiefs of Pokanoket, and we have four other chiefs in the different family lines. And this is really something, because right up, I guess it'd be upstream, is where Roger Williams came before being moved into Providence, Rhode Island. Governor Winthrop from Plymouth Plantations told him that he was still on his tract of land, and he had to cross over into Providence at Gano Street. But originally he was here in East Providence. At that time it was Seekonk. So, I guess this is one of the sites of one of the Pokanoket villages. If you're not aware of the fact that Pokanoket was the largest Indian nation in colonial America. There was no nation larger than ours. There were 60 tribes, bands, and clans. And I am the great-grandson of the Massasoit, 10 generations, and of King Philip, 9 generations, and of George Washington, hand-picked bodyguard, Simeon Simons, 6th generation. And Simeon Simons is actually King Philip's great-grandson. And so that is my family line on my mother's side. On my father's side, I come from Anawan. Anawan was the head Pioneer warrior for the Osamequin who welcomed the Pilgrims to this country. And then also for his son during the King Philip War. So there was actually King Philip's uncle, or Metacama's uncle, Anawan. He was in his 80s when they killed him. So just a little bit of history about the tribes that were here back in the day. But the Massasoit was signed a treaty with the Pilgrims that lasted 54 years. And that was the first treaty with the English government that it was ever signed, and it allowed the rest of the people to come over here. If it weren't for that treaty, because his Sagamores and his sachems under him didn't want to let the English come ashore, but he did that at the time because our nation had gone from like 3,000 warriors to under 300 warriors, and he needed a pact of protection against the warlike tribes here. But just a little bit of history. Right, but once again, thank you for inviting me here to this groundbreaking ceremony, I guess, for the Watchemoket Square. And it's nice to see that you're going to be doing some great things with the property here. Right.
It really is an honor to be in your presence, and that's what's so special about East Providence. It's the rich, rich history of the people who were here way long before any Europeans came over. But if you look at the history of immigration that has been East Providence, all the different nationalities that came afterwards, and they came in groups and bands, and myself, my family being Portuguese, being one of the groups that more recently who have immigrated to this beautiful city. But anyways, I'm going to turn it over to Jim, and Jim, take it from there.
Thank you, Mayor. Appreciate it. I appreciate everyone coming out here. We've had some great conversations. For those who arrived for the presentation since 4 o'clock, we've had some really good conversations. Really looking forward to providing a presentation that's going to really give you an impression of what the city's thinking about and the consultant's thinking about. And hopefully after the presentation is completed, there'll be a continued period to have a few questions and to fill out more of these questions and maybe potentially spend a few minutes after the presentation updating some of these boards that are around the room. Just as the mayor indicated, my name is Jim Moran. I'm the economic planner for the city of East Providence. Working today in tandem with Pam Sherrill, who's the executive director of the Waterfront Commission. Bill Fazioli is also in attendance tonight. And we have a variety of other individuals from the team here to work with you. So looking forward to presenting this to you this evening. Without needing ado. I just wanted to start out with a slide that kind of identified a project that's not necessarily directly involved with the Watchemoket Square, but it's very closely tied to the successes that we might see in the square and in the city in the future. And it includes, if you see on the left, that is an image of the current proposal for the crossing at Henderson Bridge. And if you're familiar with the Henderson Bridge, now they call it the Henderson Expressway. What's that?
Henderson Bridge is this one here.
Yeah, I don't know. Is there a laser on this baby? I don't know.
Yeah, there is. I think it's the top button.
Top button?
Should be red.
There you go. Look at that. Ask and you shall receive. I better make sure I don't put this into anybody's eyes, though. So this particular image right here is currently under the design efforts by the Rhode Island Department of Transportation. This design is not necessarily finalized, but I did want to bring it up as an important part of creating connections between the Henderson crossing here, the Henderson Bridge crossing between Providence and East Providence, and the connections to Watchemoket Square. If you look to this image on the right, you see an image that shows the I-195 interchange. And the thing that's really kind of important about this image is it shows this particular ramp right here that kind of comes off of I-195 and provides direct access to the waterfront. And what makes that important? What makes that important is that people coming off of I-195 heading in from Fall River and New Bedford will be able to get off at Waterfront Drive and not have to get up to Broadway and find a convoluted way to get into the waterfront. And then things like the closure of Valley Street, which probably will be touched on a little bit more later in the presentation, but these are all things that are going to be happening on our highway systems that are going to affect Watchemoket Square. So right up front, I kind of wanted to bring that up. The top image here just kind of shows some early proposals as to what they were putting the ramp in, and then potentially, as some people from potentially Providence know, they're going to potentially be looking to close this Gano Street off-ramp, and that's still being studied. I didn't know if Pam had anything she wanted to add.
The only thing I would like to add is that it's because of DOT's ability to find very creative financing through Senator Reed's office and through U.S. Department of Transportation. When I started 2 years ago, none of these were on the horizon, and so I'm very, very happy to see, because these are the catalyst for the change in the waterfront district, of which Watchemoket Square is really one of those key gateways.
Okay, just a quick slide. There's a lot on this slide, but I just wanted to give you a quick overview. And I had answered the question to a gentleman who had asked this question earlier. We received funding from the Economic Development Administration to fund a portion of this project. We also have received funding from the Commerce Corporation, a $75,000 Main Street Improvement Grant, and are using these funds to develop this study. And as indicated, and as you can tell by the individuals who are here tonight, we hired Beta Group as the consulting firm to complete this work. And you can see just some of the things they're looking to do as part of the design study here, identifying appropriate locations for welcome and wayfinding and branding signage, recommendations for potential locations for additional convenient public parking, recommendations for strengthening connectivity and walkability, using a complete streets approach, working with the Arts Council to develop public art, and developing placemaking recommendations that foster and support downtown vibrancy and entrepreneurship, because EDA funds, as most people are aware, maybe not aware, is that they want to see job growth. The reason why they fund these things is they're trying to build business and build jobs, so that's one of the major reasons why we're doing this. And I know that Beta will be getting more in detail on some of the things they're going to be accomplishing with this later on in the presentation. Anybody familiar with Oddfellows Hall? I'm sure we all are. It's a beautiful building. It's a National Register building, and it's great news to hear that Indigo Holdings, a company, is coming in now, and they're doing the improvements as we speak. Right now, if you look carefully, you can see they're completing improvements that are going to build this structure back to somewhat its form. I mean, perhaps it'll never get back to its original glory, but they're certainly going to bring it back to a point where it's going to look a lot better. It's going to support economic development. The second floor will include the offices of Indigo Holdings, and then the first floor will be retail and a variety of different potential retails, perhaps a restaurant, cafes, that type of thing. Just a little bit of an interior view of some of the things that you'd see inside of the Oddfellows Hall as it was prior to its renovation efforts, and I'm sure these things look a lot different right now. One of the projects that we wanted to identify, and I'm going to give this to Pam Sherrill because she can do a much better job explaining this waterfront development project.
Okay, where the hot rides used to be, I'll describe it like a Rhode Islander. At 30 Veterans Memorial Parkway, I did touch on it briefly before. A developer is going to put a second floor on there and turn it into 22 residential units. These are small units. These are so that we can attract the millennials, and we look at this as a very positive move for the city of East Providence. Let's get those millennials to stay in East Providence. Let's get them to then buy a house in Kent Heights or in Rumford or in Riverside. Let's keep them in this community, and that's the way we grow our economy in the future. So that should be breaking ground in the next couple of months.
Thank you. Now basically moving on to the waterfront events at Bull Point Park. Obviously, people are aware of the great seasonal concert venue at Bull Point that's been going on for the past few seasons. They're going to be coming back for another season at their location that they're in right now, but they're looking to build a larger venue out on the quay. And you can see the quay is right, oh, sorry. Getting ahead of myself, I'm not hitting the laser. Is right here. And
no one sees.
right, exactly. And so what you can see on the right here, not to get into a lot of detail, but what you can see on the right, this image here kind of represents the kind of more permanent venue that would be proposed on the quay. There'd be obviously parking. They're looking to create a really cutting-edge entertainment venue right here in East Providence and very much in the Watchemoket Square area.
So this is still in the discussion stage. Nothing has come across my desk, certainly, in the East Providence Waterfront Commission, but it's part of the buzz of what's making things happen on the waterfront. So we're very excited about this project coming down the pike.
Right, so that's just something that we're excited to see potentially moving forward. And certainly there'll be questions. If anybody has questions afterwards, we can certainly talk to those questions. Real quick overview of some of the parcels that are involved, that are in the proximity of Watchemoket Square, that will ultimately have a big impact on how Watchemoket Square develops and the kind of the recommendations that are generated here and as part of this study. The South Quay, as we just were talking about, 44 acres, kind of talked about what's being proposed on that location. There's also discussion regarding a green economy deep water port at the facility that would potentially be a laydown area for wind turbine components. So that's part of the South Quay property. Moving on, immediately north of the quay is a property that we call the bow tie, the Unical property bow tie. And it's a property that has the potential, again, for mixed-use development. A $9.37 million tax increment finance package was basically just recently approved by the City Council. And I'm going to hand this off to Pam if she wants to add a few words there.
Sure. Again, this is, the city passed this TIF ordinance to make this a more developable parcel. This is a challenging site. It has a major gas or oil pipeline through it. It's within the 100-year flood zone. So some challenges to develop it, but once it's developed, this could be the front door for that venue down at the South Quay.
And the image that you see right down here, actually, well, here I am doing that again. I'm sorry. This is the image that came out of the TIF proposal that they had kind of shown as a potential. Again, this is a potential development proposal scheme. The Chevron development site, 22.7 acres, located on the Veterans Memorial Parkway. People have heard a lot of buzz about this project over the years. There's a potential for a lot of mixed-use, high-density residential development, potentially medical-related. Also, for this property, there was a $32 million tax increment finance package that was approved by the city for funding of the public improvements on that site. And again, I'll give you Pam a quick.
Yeah. One of the major improvements is the continuation of Waterfront Drive. And I heard a lot of comments up at the boards just now about how people are concerned about safety on Waterfront Drive, with a lot of seniors that use this road with walkers and whatever. So that's very, very important to us. Also, Waterfront Drive, the plan is that it would be extended southward and come up, make a connection up to both to the bike path along the shore, East Bay bike path, as well as up to Vets Parkway. This will create a great opportunity to get some of the pressure of the roadways, the traffic that's on Vets Parkway.
Okay. And that would lead to the beta group portion of this presentation. I wanted to request Eric Galley to come to, oh, there he is, right there. He's going to begin the beta group presentation, and I've taken a look at what they've got prepared, and I think it's going to give everyone a great overview of what they're trying to accomplish and what the city's trying to accomplish as part of this study. Eric?
So thank you all for coming this evening. It's been a great turnout. I'm going to try to do about 20 more minutes, and then what we want to do is have questions from the audience, and we're going to try to do also some reporting back. There's a lot of input that we've gathered, and I think some of our folks will be able to say sort of, this is what we've learned so far this evening. It's been a great listening session. This is the kind of work that we do at the beginning of these projects to start thinking about, what are the underlying sentiments, ideas, thoughts that might lead to sort of the branding and some ideas about redevelopment of the area. I'm going to speak first, and I'm going to introduce Dan Stevens. Dan Stevens from Comoin Associates, Comoin 310 Associates, I'm sorry. And they are our economic consultants, so there's an economic component to this related to businesses and jobs, as well as the branding and placemaking and transportation. It's a big assignment, but we're excited to take it on. So I just wanted to touch on, it's not a new idea that there's tremendous energy and excitement, and especially in the area where the land meets the water. And when we started this project, someone said to me, well, what is Watchemoket anyway? So I thought maybe we should start off with a definition. I hope I'm close. So it's an American Indian word describing sort of where the land and water meets. And it also talked about sort of the smell of this tidal condition. And I think folks have pointed out this was also a site where it's possible to cross the Seekonk and go into the land of Providence. So this is a very important area going back hundreds and hundreds of years. And that's where the name comes from. So we thought we'd do a little more looking. And Watchemoket became a place. It became a square. What you're looking at is on the sort of heading up to the east here. There's Warren Avenue and Taunton Avenue, and you can see it was a very important place of commerce, because it became the first place where colonists began to cross the river, and then settlement grew up from this point as well. And so I think going forward, as we talk about this project and what does Watchemoket mean now and into the future, I think we have to look back at what it meant and then think about it as a confluence or really as a gateway. So our project area extends, all the way down here to this end of the bow tie lot, Unical property, Bold Point, comes all the way up, and we go along the edge of the highway. But their influence is, far beyond to the south and to the north as well, that are factors to consider. And so working with the city, we sort of said, well, what's the square today? And we kind of settled on this footprint. I think this is Burgess, down to Moran, and Waterfront Drive, and then back up Warren. The original bridge across was right here. This is where it sort of all happened as far as early development goes. So, finding Watchemoket, it means starting with finding East Providence. So we could do a competition. I'm going to put a couple slides up. If you see the words East Providence, raise your hand. Andrew, Alyssa, they're here. Will tell me whoever sees the words East Providence, let me know. So here we go. So nor does it say Pokanoket Nation either. You'll notice that it's sort of hard. I'm not really looking for Taunton. That's a place in Massachusetts. And Riverside, I'm not really sure where that is. And is there a waterfront here? Where am I headed? Let's try another ramp. We'll try this one. Does it say East Providence? No, it doesn't. Well, okay, we got to the end of the ramp, and I think we're here, but where are we? So this is the gateway. And I think what happens is when you drive these roads and you sort of think about living here, you kind of get used to or accustomed to this. But for people that might be coming to the area, people coming to events, people coming to this as a arts and culture, district, I think these are things we have to start working on. Oh yeah, so then we're here. We got here. This is our team. We're out walking around, and the waterfront. It's a bold point. I mean, the waterfront must be around, but you can't really see the water, and it's. If you drive to the water, you have some challenging intersections to kind of work your way through. And has anyone ever tried to walk to the waterfront from like 4th Street or? Yeah, it's not that easy either. So walking's not easy, driving's not easy. But I guess history tells us it's been that way for a really long time. From the industrialization of the shoreline, the development along the shoreline, there's always a really challenging barrier, at least for the last 100 years, to sort of make that connection to the water. So it's hard to get a sense of place, it's hard to feel the water, and that's what this project is intended to take on. So these are some ideas. We'll show you some images of inspirational images, I think, of things that we think might work in this district, might be applicable through the concept of placemaking. And somebody else asked me the other day, they said, well, can you talk about placemaking? What is placemaking? We'll come back to this in a minute. But it's a multifaceted approach to the planning and design of the public realm. So the public realm is the parks, the streets, the sidewalks, the areas that might be on the edges, pocket parks and things like that. And it's designed to capitalize on your assets. And we think all of these are going to sort of come together, promote health, happiness, and well-being. And the mission is to look at the development of an arts and entertainment district. So I'm going to turn it over and introduce Dan, but placemaking is an art and a science. I'm kind of the art side, and I'll let Dan talk about the science side a little bit.
So I'm an economics guy, so I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the numbers, but try not to bore anybody too badly here. So what is an arts and entertainment district? What are we talking about? It's in the name. but it's a little bit more than that. So, this is an area, an arts and entertainment district. It's an area with a concentration. Generally a pretty small, kind of compact, very walkable, something that you can park and walk around and experience. And what you see here, are some of the what I would call the traditional elements of an arts and entertainment district. So events, art festivals, food-related festivals, these types of things, outdoor events, gallery space, open artist studios, things that you can get in and experience the art, interact with artists. Artist housing is an important part of these types of districts. It's kind of maintaining a sense of authenticity, which, in economic development and talking about tourism development, kind of the authenticity factor, if you will, is one of the things that we really hone in on, because that's one of the things that visitors these days are really interested in, places that are really authentic, real, not kind of overly commercialized. Dining, restaurants, outdoor dining, live entertainment, those types of things. And then fun, some whimsy. These places have a lot of public art. There's often things that are kind of interactive, public art installations. And it's all kind of goes back to, this idea of this being kind of a unique, special place, and really, a draw of people. It's kind of, what we're thinking about in terms of economic development with these types of districts. So why an arts and entertainment district? Lots of reasons. I'm going to talk mostly about, some of the reasons from an economic development perspective, but obviously, there's quality of life benefits. These are fun places to go and experience. They're great for community, building vibrant communities, dynamic communities. And of course, all of that goes into economic development. But a couple of things here, supporting local artists. Artists, generally fall in that category of being entrepreneurs, and this is, a way to support them. There's ways, there's artist housing programs, of course, but commissioning works, these types of things, bringing in visitors who, purchase artwork, these types of things. The tourism benefits of these types of arts and entertainment districts are pretty substantial. It creates, essentially a magnet for visitors, and of course visitors have wallets and spend money, local businesses, and again, that kind of gets cycled through the local economy, generating some other benefits, and this can really be pretty substantial. Attracts businesses. Businesses, tend to gravitate towards these types of people, these types of districts rather, because they want to go where the people are. They know, as visitors start to pour in, business owners, developers, investors, they see that activity and they follow that activity. Attracting residents, these places tend to have a pretty high cool factor, if you will, and this is where people want to live. Millennials want to live in these types of places. Empty nesters, older folks that are downsizing, they gravitate towards these types of places because, there's a high quality of life, high quality of place, lots of fun stuff to do, amenities, places to eat, shop, and so on. And, all of this kind of leads to increased property values as a result because, this is, it's kind of, again, that magnet idea where, you have a high concentration of amenities, some fun stuff, cool stuff. This is where people, money, investors, development wants to go. So quickly, this diagram you see here is just kind of talking about what Eric alluded to, the idea that placemaking is a critical piece of this project. And in economic development, kind of classic economic development was always about business development. Then it started to be a little bit more about workforce development, but increasingly it's about building quality places. The old way of thinking was, you would move to your job. And now it's kind of the other way around. Businesses are going to where the people are, and the people are going, to fun, interesting places. So how do we get there? One of the things is, building off of the assets that are already here. And, there are a number, both in the city and in our study area here, a number of restaurants already in the district, a comedy club. There's these existing assets. You see there the purple dots. You can't see those very well, but those are restaurants and bars. A pretty significant number already in the city and in our study area. And then the green dots there, the arts and cultural establishments. There are already a number of institutions, organizations, and you see some of them up there. So the framework is already here in place. So it's how do we build off of what we already have? Understanding strengths, I mentioned data. I just pulled a couple things here. There's quite a bit of industry and economic data that we look at and numbers that we crunch. So, what are the types of industries that are growing the fastest? What is growing, what's doing well here, and what opportunities does that present for our study area and the city as a whole? And so you see you probably can't read that very well, but the first two on that top chart are restaurants. Full service, limited service, pretty much covers every type of restaurant, are the two fastest growing industries in the city. So, what does that mean for potential? That tells us right off the bat that, that's something that's doing well. Is there more room to run and build off of that momentum? Which ones are unusually concentrated? So the idea being that if you have a high concentration in a particular type of business, that is a strength, potential opportunity to build off of. And you see there, musical groups and artists are incredibly concentrated in the city. We use a measure, which I won't get into the nuts and bolts too much of, a concentration measure that compares the number of jobs in different types of industries relative to the U.S. as a whole. And so you see they're 23 times more concentrated in the city compared to the U.S. So, that tells me that there's, really something to build off of here in terms of a strong arts community moving forward. Identifying opportunities. So, strengths present opportunities, but, what else is out there? And, from the data and, existing assets and things that we know are in and around the study area. Jim mentioned some projects that are happening. What are the opportunities that are created as a result of those projects? As new people move into the waterfront, that kind of changes. We look at real estate market dynamics, and that changes the potential for different types of development, business opportunities, and so on. Again, just some data really quickly here. We look at retail data, looking at what gaps exist. And so we look at what folks in the local neighborhood are spending money on, and we compare that to the sales at local businesses, and it tells us if folks are leaving the area to spend money in certain categories, outside of the area, outside of the city, outside of the neighborhood. And so it starts to tell us if, we have some unmet retail needs. And you see there what's circled is that restaurants are lacking, essentially, according to the data. There's room for more restaurants in the city and in our study area because there's residents spending, people in the neighborhood are spending money at restaurants, or they're not spending money at restaurants, and they could be. And so there's an opportunity to recapture some of that type of spending. So again, just an example of some of the data that we look at. At some point there will be a nice thick report for you to browse through if you're interested. But again, some of the other things, opportunities related to some of the other development. And then, we have a pretty significant bike path running through our study area. These types of bike paths and trails tend to have a lot of untapped, unlocked potential. And so you see two examples here of businesses that are actually oriented to the bike path. So they have bike path, or they have parking for bicycles right on the path. And it's an opportunity to really tap into, the users of the bike path, instead of just having people, bike or walk or run through the study area. How do we think about getting them to stop, patronize local businesses, Are there business opportunities related specifically to cycling, recreation? Could a bike shop be supported here? These are all types of things that we'll be looking at. And so lastly, how do we get there? I think as Eric mentioned, as part of this effort, there will be an economic development strategy with recommendations on how to capitalize on some of the opportunities that we're finding. And there will be a roadmap on how to make those things happen. So a guide, an implementation guide, what are the resources and funding that are available to make it happen, what partnerships exist to make it happen, what new partnerships might need to be created, what can the city do, what regulations, policies, programs might need to be created, changed, and so on. And so, what we're hoping to do as part of this plan is really set the framework so that this area evolves as new investment comes in, business comes in, it starts to evolve into a very vibrant arts and cultural entertainment district. So with that, I think I can turn you back over to Eric.
Yeah.
Thanks. So one of the things Dan touched on, I'm going to just keep moving, is brand identification. So part of this project and some of the questions we ask you, sort of thematically, what do you see as the brand? What's of interest? Ideas like public art, signage that speaks to the brand. Is your brand maritime based? Is it arts and entertainment based? Is it industrial heritage? We're sort of going to be looking at sort of what some of those thoughts are that we collected tonight. Wayfinding signage. Gateway treatments, we talked about coming down in. Ideas about public art. Ideas about interactive public art that draws people down. You can see on the waterfront on the lower right. So when we begin to start looking, we've already met with the East Providence Arts Council to begin the discussion of where are opportunities for art. There's plenty of spaces that seem to be available. Maybe they could house large sculptures, three-dimensional pieces of art. There are also opportunities for maybe nodes, smaller corners, smaller intersections. Maybe there's opportunities for interpretive panels, artistic pieces in those areas. We've also been working with the city on some ideas about what's called asphalt art. So if you look and see, this is First Street. In some communities, they've painted graphics or designs on the pavement. Have folks seen that before? And so it adds sort of a level of interest. Right now, that's the section where the bike path, if you're using the bike path, you have to ride on the street and the sharrows. We have this idea that maybe art on the pavement could also help sort of calm traffic a little bit and indicate where the cyclist should be. So it's an idea that we're working on already to sort of explore. This project also includes the idea of some gateways. So we're here on Taunton now, coming in from sort of the downtown. Ideas about these bridges, perhaps there could be some gateway sort of making it more easy and sort of friendlier to walk from these neighborhoods to come down. And you can see these little, sort of every little circle is a gateway opportunity. So those are all things that we're going to be looking at, and ideas about introducing sort of art and how the district might sort of have a brand that arises from the arts community. And so, when you look at the sidewalks, you look at the streets, these are just ideas, but, a sculpture just doesn't have to be in one place. It just doesn't have to be all set in one area. It could be stretched out. It could be a series of pieces that you visit as you're traveling throughout the district. Ideas like wide sidewalks, lighting, street trees, more public art, in the form of a giant bluefin. And these things will all support the arts and entertainment, presence that already exists, and hopefully cultivate more. And so, the district themes, depending on what comes out of tonight, ideas, maybe if it's more industrial, maybe some of the pieces actually make their way into the streetscapes, and they become pieces of lighting, or objects that of interest. And the idea is that this is also going to create sort of diverse and engaging areas right along the waterfront in terms of whether it's public investment or public-private partnership, more park space, more walkability, greater path connectivity, eventually a bike path down along the waterfront. Another big component of this project is intermodal transportation, and so planning for the success, as you talk about the economic success, we have to think about how transportation is going to work, and this is just an early diagram. Similar gateways, you can see they kind of overlap with art gateways, but this is talking about transportation and looking at segments of where the bikeway connection needs to be strengthened, areas where we don't have a great pedestrian network that we maybe need to work on sidewalks, and ideas about connectivity, linking some of the downtown areas down into the district. This is a concept we were working on early on, ideas looking at First Street. Maybe there's a way to make the bike path what we call a protected bike path, so that would be separated from the cars, where people could walk safely and bike safely without worrying about cars coming at them. It's particularly difficult, I think, if you have children and you're on the bike path and you transition onto the street. We've seen some pretty interesting situations. And I think what Dan would say is this idea then sets up that you can begin to engage on this edge in a retail setting, in a coffee shop setting, and you begin to cultivate businesses that sort of center on this spine. And it's not really easy to develop businesses on the Washington Bridge, that won't happen, or on Veterans Parkway, but here maybe represents an idea that, whether it's coupled with the asphalt art or the protected bikeway, that maybe there's sort of a nucleus in Watchemoket Square. And then also Moran Ave, right now there's not great sidewalks, so maybe there's a way to work that in and make the connection down to the waterfront more robust. So again, part of this effort is a broad-based multimodal transportation sort of look at what's going on, what the influences are, and again, looking at gateways, and you can see sort of here's the off-ramp talked about, the intersection, the piece of Warren. All these pieces are going to be looked at in the study, and recommendations regarding safety, pedestrian safety, and bike safety are a piece of what we're doing here. And again, it's all kind of meant to be one resultant master plan that sort of gives vision and ideas about placemaking for the area, and it has these underlying themes of public art and the attraction and the events on the waterfront. I wanted to leave a little bit of time just to talk about maybe what we learned and have some questions. I don't know, Andrew's across the room. I know you and Alyssa have sort of been looking at the boards. Is there a way to, and maybe we bring the lights up a little bit? We can look at the boards. Did everyone have a chance to vote and participate and write notes? And talk to us at the end if you haven't, because we want more. So, yeah, you want to do that first? This one right next to you?
Okay, I was looking at these. Show us the place that you like the most. And when I look at this diagram, at this plan, Bold Point just pops right out at me. Obviously, this is an area that people have enjoyed, whether they've enjoyed it for the concerts, whether they go down there and fish, put their boats in there, or me, put my kayak in there, watch the sunset. It is a great area. But it said, how secure is the Green Jacket Shoal area from encroachment by developers? The Green Jacket Shoal area is right off Bold Point, and this is an area that's a natural shoal. It's only 6 or 7 feet deep, and so it's an area that's never been developed or dredged. So I don't, because it's so shallow in there, I don't think that any development would adversely affect that, but that's just what I'm saying. What attention is being paid to the indigenous Native American place on this land in 1675 and before? One of the things that I've heard tonight is a need for education, for interpretive panels, an opportunity for heritage tourism. I know at my phase in life, I love to go to a community and go to the visitor center and say, tell me what's special about your area. What should I know about? What should I come away with? And the interpretive panels, and my husband will agree that, oh, she never passes an interpretive panel without reading it. For me, these are very important things. So I think we can recognize the Native people's heritage, the great Green Jacket Shoals with the 28 scuttled boats that are out there, that we can learn about our heritage through that. Is it possible to think of Bold Point area as an extension of the Blackstone Heritage Corridor, the Esso station of the boat world in the Upper Bay? And that's what I was talking about, where the Green Jacket Shoals has been an area where these boats were scuttled because it was right outside of the boatyard. The boatyards were the Esso stations of the bay in the past. I also look at the cluster along Warren Ave, certainly at the Black Duck, 133 Club, the Comedy Connection, a lot of attention in this area. Also where the linear park comes off the Washington Bridge. A lot of attention. This is a great spot that needs to be celebrated. Also, the East Providence Yacht Club. Great views of the sunsets, great beer for your buck. This is a great neighborhood, a watering area, and a great community asset. Just moving over to this next plan, this is show us the place that needs the most attention. One of the things that I heard over and over again is the congestion along Warren Ave. All of us know how crazy it is where Valley Street comes out and the Valley Street people don't stop, or they creep ahead, and you've got the tank trucks coming through, and you've got the people on the bike path coming through. We all know that that is not a safe situation. So we're really glad to have the traffic engineers from Beta look at this to tell us what are some changes that could be made that we can either utilize city forces, DOT forces to make things happen. Fix the park. Fix the park up. You can't walk there anymore. I know the city has done a great job grading the road before the Bold Point performances and everything, but it doesn't hold up. Those tractors, you know, the big trailer rigs with the boats on it, they chew it up. This would be a great place for residents of Tockwatton to walk down to the shoreline, but if you're in a walker or a wheelchair, it's just not possible. So I look at Bold Point as an area, this is like a jewel that Waterfront Productions has scratched the surface of, told us that we have a great asset, and now we need to develop this in the future for the benefit of all city residents. A terrace garden at Braga Bridge, down from the Braga Club. Signage on Green Jacket Shoals. Quick. Show us where to invest first. And this is a lot of dots along First Street. And I think that's in recognition of the challenge that this is the only on-road link on the East Bay bike path from between Bristol and Providence. This bike path has the third highest commuter bike usage in the state. That's a phenomenal asset. Phenomenal. It's 12 months a year. You can sit at the Black Duck Tavern in February with snow on the ground and watch people come down at commuter times. But this is a safety risk, and it's something that will improve the city of East Providence if that situation is improved. Clean up the park, continue the remediation of Unical, get it developed, and make that an asset for the city. Parking for the Comedy Connection, parking along Warren Ave, and for St. Mary's Church. We heard that from several people. Also, a really neat idea for the National Grid property that's on the corner of Moran and First, to make that a public park, a gazebo there, make it someplace where people on the bike path could stop and enjoy the location. So I'll turn it on over to you.
That's
and
great.
I apologize if I didn't catch anyone's.
So, right, and these will all be captured in our report. So these will be sort of heat maps, and they help. You can see there's some consistency between the boards as we go through them. So it helps sort of the city plan and identify strategies and sort of where to start first. But we're seeing definitely interest here and at First Street. Wonder if we could talk a little bit about what you guys see. I'm going to introduce Andrew Pichette. Andrew's landscape architect at Beta. I'll give you the mic and we'll talk about.
So as you guys know, we've got kind of moved around the room, and as we get to each of these boards, they represented different themes that we wanted to try to bring into the square. So we had various photos that kind of represented different parts and pieces of those themes. So we'll kind of go through and figure out what was responded to well, and kind of, again, some of the comments that we had as we were going through here. Dr. Weed started the night off talking about really embracing the past and the history of the space. We think it's really important. So we had these 4 thoughts, maritime history, fishing industry, the colonial and the Native American history, and the transportation history that was through here. So again, I think they were pretty equally responded to in terms of what wants to be represented. The way I described it to somebody was, if you had a total stranger coming into your space, into Watchemoket Square, what would you want them to learn and see? And Pam kind of nailed it with the interpretive signage. And somebody actually put that as one of the comments here was Green Jacket Shoal, the Native American history, some of the fishing and industry history that is in the area, to have some interpretive signage to really describe what is happening currently in the area and what happened in the past in the area to really get people to understand. One of the comments that we had was bringing businesses back that really embrace the culture of the area. So again, having a small fishing market, really, trying to capture some sort of business opportunities that might embrace what the history was. And again, it seems like restaurants might be one of those opportunities as we start to look around. And then a few comments on, it's really important not just to acknowledge the colonial history, but again, the Native American history. And really making sure, again, people might not have the opportunity to ask, are you a Native American? So really getting people to understand that there are, the Pokanokets are here. There is Native American presence here currently. And again, make sure people are aware of that. So as we start to move down, we took a look at transportation. And again, in these 4 slides that represented some of the thoughts we had, again, pretty universally responded to. Everyone feels these are of importance. So looking at public transportation, one of the comments that we had was to add a bus stop at Tukwatan. There is a representative from RIPTA here. I don't know if you want to speak a little more to this, but there are proposed public transportation improvements that are happening in the area.
Absolutely. Yeah, over the last year, we've been working on a transit. That's easy.
Thank you. I'm Zachary Agish. I am a capital planner at RIPTA. And for the last year and a half, we've been working with residents across the state of Rhode Island on trying to develop a transit master plan for the next 20 years. And so on the board, you've seen one of the iterations that we've been going through. There's still a lot more conversation. There's still a lot more comments we're still going through. But we definitely see East Providence having a lot of opportunity in the transit sphere. And so if there are other comments that people feel that might be important, especially in this part of the city where we know there's a lot of transit today and there's a lot of opportunity in the future, those comments are greatly appreciated because it allows me to go back to my colleagues and our strategic partners at the state to really make sure that's put into the final plan. So I do want to bring that up, but I appreciate that.
Thank you. So again, as we start to move around transportation, looking at the proposed intersection improvements, we do have a part of our team at Beta that's looking at the transportation existing and then proposed. We're really looking at this photo down here, improving pedestrian safety, improving safety of bikers that are coming through the area, and really just developing a nicer corridor, introducing street trees that are going to slow traffic, really just make a better space. And then again, on the left, we look at 2 images. This first one that Eric showed in his earlier slides. Again, protection of the bike path on the street, which we feel like is really important. And again, the photo down here, which I think both kind of resonate to one another, of a woman pushing her child in the grass instead of on a protected bike path or on the sidewalk. So again, we'll continue moving down. Looking at some economic themes, again, Dan had kind of gone through some of the findings initially and some thoughts moving forward. We saw a lot of good response to dining and retail. We saw that those are dining as a whole that exists in the area. I think it's pretty positive that people recognize that. They want to see dining, they want to see retail. And again, a lot of these improvements, as Eric mentioned, are going to kind of fuel both the dining and the retail end of things. Somebody would love to comment. When we think about our artists' housing and the dining and the retail, that this really just is going to make for a healthy square. All of these pieces are going to kind of help develop that. Again, resonating again with small businesses, protecting small and local businesses, and really making sure that as new development comes in, that those businesses aren't pushed out. And then again, talking about businesses, manufacturing, keeping things local shall be encouraged, and that there should really be a strong mix of businesses in the area. Moving over to artistic themes, had a conversation with a gentleman about interactive art. So as you bring people into the space, really either letting them interact through, whether it's a musical opportunity where somebody can come in and play some sort of an instrument, or again, in a lot of playgrounds we see that nowadays where instead of just coming and playing on the play equipment, they can interact with whether it's a xylophone or drums or whatever it might be, just having certain opportunities like that. Again, we think about the asphalt art on First Street. And then again, there's a gentleman, Rich Waterhouse in the back over here, had come up with the idea of a lantern trail. Almost a four-sided plywood structure that we might be able to implement on a piece of public property. I'm sure Rich, probably pick Rich's brain about it later tonight, but just an opportunity, you know, to have a four-side installation where you could show off local art, public art, and again, in some of those public spaces that Eric had highlighted. I'll pass the mic on to Alyssa.
Hi everyone, so moving on to our attractions category, our question was which ideas do you like, and from everyone's input it seems like the one in the top corner over here, the festivals, really was a popular vote, which actually says a lot about the community. It says you like to gather in your local spaces and support local businesses and other small shops. Again, the music was also a big popular one.
We have some folks here from Rhode Island, Waterfront Enterprises. Thanks for coming. Hopefully you're learning like us. Maybe this you already knew. So, but anyway, we appreciate you being here. So yeah, that has a little voice.
That's okay. And then moving on to the public realm, kind of like the public spaces, what makes a public space. The one, again, in the top right corner over here seemed to be very popular. And this one kind of displays like that waterfront access, how that's probably important to everyone in this room, having a little bit of greenery brought into this space, and also just having an open space for people to have that access to the water. And then
Just one, is it fair to say lighting got a little votes too?
oh yeah, lighting too down here, which also definitely makes the space a lot more inviting to the community. Right now along the waterfront, I don't think there is a bunch of lighting, so that would also be another benefit to add to a space like this.
I might just add one thing. I don't know if anybody had any ideas. One of the things that's potentially going to happen is that the Valley Street underpass is going to be potentially closing. And the question would be is what kind of artistic elements potentially could be used there, or is it something that you don't have anything there? That's the thing I was interested if anybody had any ideas about what you would do with the space under that bridge, because that potentially could be used for a variety of purposes, and that's one of the things that,
Up to DOT, however.
if that does end up getting closed, I mean, if anybody, I know we're getting close to the end here, but if anybody had any ideas about, if anybody's ever seen perhaps anything that is done under an underpass, how they might use artistic elements or other things that to help improve the space, that would be appreciated in terms of thoughts.
Yeah, we'll be here afterwards. We have one board left to just report back on, but feel free to come up and chat at the end.
So moving on to our last board, this one's actually really important. This is kind of what the barriers are to the opportunity that could be in East Providence, so things are keeping people from coming to the area or even knowing that the area is here. It seemed that the top four were very important to everyone in the room. This one's the busy crosswalks. This is actually the intersection at First Street and Warren Ave. Traffic congestion, lack of sidewalks, and lack of signage. So all four of those could definitely be improved to bring people to the area and make it a more successful space.
So that concludes sort of the reporting back piece. I'm happy to take questions. We have the whole team here. If folks have questions, yeah, sure.
I just got, when I was sitting here watching that, and I'm kind of tying on to what the mayor said. You know, he's talking about all the different nationalities that have come to this country. And then I hear from the Native Americans, we wouldn't even be here if it wasn't for you, right? We wouldn't even be here. We'd be all back in England. And if it wasn't for Roger Williams, I'd like to see what I'm getting to. Oh, let me just say what about Roger. If it wasn't for Roger Williams, we'd all belong to the Church of England, which is the Episcopal Church, my church in this country, right? Because he founded the freedom of religion, which is a very, very important thing to all of America. You know, it was Rhode Island is the place of the first synagogue, right? It's so important. Providence doesn't own Roger Williams. We're part of Rhode Island too. Right? So what I envision, some sort of information booth. You know, it's sort of like what the over in
Like a kiosk.
like several kiosks. Like yours, you know, you'd have something. I'd like to see statues of Indians too. I really would. But you know, one for the Canary Islands and one for the black Americans. That's been marginalized in this country. It's a shame. You know, they should be there. Right? Everybody, the Portuguese didn't just come here 75 years ago. They were here 350 years ago also. You know, but all this is being missed. So if you got one place where you can go and kind of tie all of us together, our heritage all together, I think, and just show the differences in how we're a lake. Every nationality that wants to belong to it.
Yeah,
That's how I see it.
It's a great story, and I think the exit ramp pictures that I showed, sort of a metaphor for, there's a lot to find here that no one knows, and there's so many stories to be told. It's definitely gonna be a big part of what we're thinking and looking at.
I'd like to see them all in one building.
Okay, great.
Okay.
Other questions or comments? Yes.
I have a question. Is probably, I don't know, when you start digging and doing anything that involves digging, if you should find bones, what will you do?
Well, that's a good question.
It's a
because
very
it
good question.
Because it has to be done, you know, in partnership, right? And this project's a conceptual level, so it's more like a master plan, but it's not too early to start those conversations, which is why I'm so pleased that you were able to come tonight, because to make you part of the beginning helps that dialogue happen early and be consistent throughout. So our hopes are that, you know, once the master planning work is done, there are projects that are break ground and make improvements to the sites. And at that point, you know, I'm confident that there'll be a relationship worked out and a process worked out to be able to go through and work with you.
Because we would have to, absolutely have to be involved.
Yes.
At the beginning of that.
Like I said tonight, it's so important that you're here, right, to have this dialogue and be really at the starting point of this process.
Make sure you give him your name and number.
To have the Sagamore, yes, duly noted. We'll be speaking. Thank you. Other questions or comments? Sure.
Just one thought, as we look at this as all waterfront property, and to remember and perhaps promote the idea of using the waterfront for getting into the water. Pam brought up the idea of kayaking. I don't know if sailboarding is going to work, I don't know if paddleboarding is going to work, but people being able to use this waterfront to get out into the Upper Bay, and also people coming from other areas of the Upper Bay to come into East Providence, not just through driving or just through the bike path, but coming in on the
Right. Welcoming people in.
Some kind of traffic that way as an invitation to come and see us.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's what some of the development folk are looking at and seeing as opportunity. You know, roadways are only becoming more congested, you know, as time goes on, so providing other modes, when I say multimodal, you know, boat, ferry, water taxi, you know, all of those things that you know, people 20 years ago didn't think would be happening, they're happening in places. You have a perfect opportunity. If you can build that density here, then you can draw those folks in. I think also you may see, and Dan and I were talking about this earlier, you may see boat ownership patterns changing over time. So in a more urbanized environment, maybe not everyone in the apartment building owns their own boat, but they're jointly owned or they're boat rentals. And so to live in a community where you can walk or ride your bike to then hop on your boat for the day, it's pretty incredible, and you offer it, and not many other communities are quite sitting at the edge of that opportunity. So it's a great insight, and we'll be paying attention to that.
And because water quality is improving in the city, things like ecotourism, where you were looking at things that maybe couldn't have been done 30 years ago, I remember, you know, you wouldn't want to go anywhere near the water in the Upper Bay. Now you can have things like kayak launch areas. You can have kayak businesses potentially. They're going to rent kayaks out and do that kind of stuff and build those kind of ecotourism type industries in the city. You know, it could be great.
Other folks? Sure.
Hi. How about things like more water activities? We don't have a local beach anywhere near here. I'm sure there's plenty of people that want to go wet their feet once in a while. I know there's a water park, you know, at the Central Park over there in East Providence because of, you know, our dear friend Robinson that passed away. But, you know, I know there's plenty of hot summer days that I don't want to drive all the way to the beach with my kid. Maybe don't want to go to the park where there's a bunch of kids. Make it more family-friendly, waterfront park, you know, water activities.
Right, you
some
can see
kind
the
of-
water, but you need a boat to kind of get on it
Yeah,
right now.
and,
Yeah,
you know-
Andrew was just catching what you're saying. It's really important.
Yeah, kind of like, you know, maybe not put a swimming pool in, or if you can, why not? But, you know, even just water
Right.
fountains, something that, like I said, someone with a
Spray
wheelchair
park,
can
yeah,
go, you know,
right.
be wheeled up and just
Those are great
get a
ideas.
little splash or something, you know?
Yeah, no, that's
On a hot
fantastic.
summer day, be nice.
Make sure, did you write that note too, or you just
I did
telling us?
not,
Okay, so
no.
Andrew took it down, so we got
Follow up on that.
I'd like to follow up on that and something Dave mentioned earlier, and that I have talked with, those of you who don't know me, I'm on the city council, and we have passed a resolution along with the Waterfront Commission supporting us, and Senator Whitehouse and entire delegation supporting. You mentioned access to the water, getting in and out. If you notice here from the Watchemoket gateway, look at it someday, go at low tide and look at the debris and the pylons that have been broken for 100 years. Part of our resolution asked to get that cleaned up and removed, because you can't kayak if you have 150 or who knows how many broken piers under the water. And we've also asked to get the old rusting railroad bridge removed that is leaning on the property of the East Providence Yacht Club. Some people like the history of the bridge. There are other bridges to enjoy history, not there, in my opinion. I want to be able to have boats come in. I've talked to a lot of boaters. I'm one, and they would like to come in to this area and visit the restaurants and the bars and whatever else we can bring in there, but they won't bring their boats in. And if you're familiar with that area or boating, or look at a chart, and there are all kinds of problems under the water. So we need to clean that up first before we can talk about kayaking and boating. Who's going to bring in, and I'm just talking about smaller boats, not Buddy Cianci type yachts to come in. But your average boat, I had friends coming up from Point Judith the other day. We were going to meet at East Providence Yacht Club, and I'm glad to see those owners are here tonight. Thank them for their support. But they came as far as they could go, and they wouldn't make that turn in. I don't know where it shows on the map, but they wouldn't make that turn in because they saw all these old pylons protruding through the water. And if you have a boat, you know what would happen if you hit one of those. So hopefully we'll get the federal funding and coastal resources approval. I know Bill Fazioli knows a lot more about this plan than I do, and I thank him for his support. If we can get a lot of that cleaned up, boaters spend money. We have a small boat. We keep ours in Narragansett, but I would love to have it here. When we're in the boat on a weekend, we go out to eat a couple times a day. We go to the local stores, whether it's a dollar store or the Marshalls or restaurants or the bars, and we spend a lot of money in the summertime. And I know people would do that here if they had a place to go and if it was safe. And finally, excuse me, you mentioned swimming. We recently received an $850,000 settlement through Volkswagen lawsuit problem with the environment to clean up Sabin Point Beach. If you haven't been down there, you need to go there. That's a beautiful beach, which you can now walk in. You mentioned wading. I wouldn't swim too far out. Might hit a couple of bodies or something underneath. But you can definitely wade in that water. That project hasn't really commenced yet, but that's a lot of money, short of $1 million to clean that beach up. Yes?
I'm sorry, on that note, sir, probably 2 years ago at most. I don't know how, when it was done, but.
No, it hasn't been done yet. We have the grant now.
That beach, the problem with that beach is, I take my child there, I have a 5-year-old, and there was needles all over that beach.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of people that use drugs and hang out at that park at night and use needles, and I couldn't walk with my toddler on that park or that beach or anywhere close to that water to skip a rock.
You can now. It's absolutely gorgeous now. And because of those things, it's been cleaned up, and it's really a great park.
That's great to know.
Thank you. Sure, go ahead.
Hello, everyone. I heard lots of talk about sculpture parks and gateways to the shoreline. And no disrespect and all, but this by Rhodey Beat says that this is the gateway to the shoreline. I've usually called it the pile of pipes. Some people have thought it was debris left over from construction projects. No offense to anybody who enjoys that type of artwork. It's supposed to represent, I guess, a ship's sails to a certain degree. As you can see, a ship, it really doesn't look anything what it's intended to do. The only thing I've noticed, because I pass by there on a daily basis, especially in the summertime, it just becomes essentially a weed trellis. And if you guys are trying to invite more people into this little section of town, I strongly suggest that something get done with either rotating art pieces, maybe acknowledging the Native Americans more so than I don't know, pick a word. Tell me what you think of this as the gateway to what's supposed to be the waterfront. So if everybody's comfortable with that, and I'm the one that doesn't enjoy seeing what I call the weed trellis, then that's cool. Then I guess I'm in the wrong. But I voiced my opinion on social media. I've had over 500 comments of people agreeing with me. The artist actually said that I need to come in person and voice my opinion. So here I am. If everybody likes this, then that's.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a good comment. I think that the space is what's important and the idea, right? So
Can
that,
you rotate artwork?
yeah, I mean, I think that the fact that you have a sculpture park and you have pieces in it is a great accomplishment. Many communities don't have that. So I think you bring up a good point of sort of what is the identity, what is the character, and those are all things that will be talked about now and into the future.
Or maintain the rest.
It's art. Not everyone understands it. It changes. It's like people
right.
don't see what it is.
Some
It's
communities,
art, win or lose.
some communities have found great success, and we've talked about this internally, with places for the art to be installed and rotating. So that was a comment you made. It's there for a year, maybe it's part of a competition, and then it moves to another location. So, again, something we might explore through this work.
Great, and thank you also for everyone that stayed for the last 2 hours. It's been great. Really appreciate all the input.
Yeah, I appreciate it. Elected officials here tonight. I want to put a shout out to a gentleman who put the survey work together, Ernie Germani tonight. He provided the survey work. I know Ernie personally. He's a great guy, and he's very engaged in the process here. He's very excited about the project moving forward, as are a number of our city employees that have been involved with this. Eric Skadberg, Stephen Kutu, of course, everybody from the planning department. Earlier tonight, we had Patrick Hanna from our office, Johanna Walzak. I see a former planner, a retired planner, Wayne Barnes, and his wife here tonight. They're very interested in what's happening here. So it's great to see an engaged community here and have this attendance. I'm very much pleased by the outcome and what we've seen here tonight in terms of all the great responses we've seen to these boards. And so I guess next steps, we're obviously a little bit behind time here, but we'll be here for a few minutes kind of deflating, if you will. So if there are really pointed questions, anyone wants to come up, we have to try to answer any. And then the next time frame for this is probably looking at the March time frame for a follow-up public workshop that'll provide recommendations based on all the feedback we've received here. So, again, invariably you have something where you haven't thanked everybody. I want to thank Zach from RIPTA for being here. And anybody else I may have forgotten. Laura McNamara is here from the Chamber of Commerce. She's been very involved in this whole process. Obviously, we know how much she's worked on the Watchemoket Square Day project. Wendy Wood, obviously, she's been worked very hard over the years with the Watchemoket Square Day. So all these things create better vibrancy and greater vibrancy in our community. So that's great to see. Very encouraged by all the people that are here tonight. With that, if there's anything else that Bill or anybody else wants to add, I think we thank everyone and say have a pleasant evening. And look forward to seeing you in the future at our next public workshop. Thank you.
Yeah,
Is in the noise. They were sure about us the present clock.